Welcome, Tim.
Thank you, BA. Welcome to you too.
Oh, thank you so much.
Be here.
It's good to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, all things considered. It's like, how do you pay attention and keep your eye on things that need to be faced, while at the same time maintaining healthy self-care? And one way that I do it is by coming here and looking at things together in solidarity and learning in the space that we're creating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you come here and you ground yourself in this learning, and I'm excited about that too today. It's been exciting. Go ahead.
Just to know that we don't have to pay attention alone, and that we can ask fair questions and learn about what's driving some of the things we're seeing in the news, and try to dig a little deeper. And I'm just really appreciating this space for doing that. Hope others.
Yeah, you're appreciating the space. I feel the same way about it. This week we've been all meeting up early in the mornings, and getting up and calling our Congress people and texting them and sending messages on C-SPAN's Washington Journal. And we've been on this adventure together and been doing this many, many days. And I'm feeling a sense of the potential in the world right now of what difference we can make. And I'm learning so much about different policies. And it gives, it's horrifying seeing what's going on, but it feels very satisfying to be able to connect with people and describe that injustice at least.
Yeah. I hope everybody knows that they can tune in and be part of the conversation, and maybe we've got some rules or some kind of some communal agreements to review. We usually do that in the beginnings. Are we ready to go there, or no? Oh, and you're on mute.
Thank you. I think we could go there, in just a sec. As people are coming in, feel free to just say hello. Feel free to say what brings you here and introduce yourself. And we can start talking about, I think what you're saying is a really great point of something that we can explore. And we should explore. Let me pull up the slides for a second. But if you're in the audience, feel free to say hello, and feel free to introduce yourselves. So we've got a couple things here that I just want to share some of the things we've been talking about for agreements. These are by no means a complete list of agreements, but these are some things that we've started thinking about as a group. Would you like to start reading them? We could take turns maybe.
Yeah. You want to do share the main screen?
Oh, you know what? Thank you.
There it is.
I know. All right.
Purposeful assumption number 1: give every idea its fair hearing. It's not a competition, but it's a lovely way to be inclusive, right?
Yeah, and a lot of people are going to come in here not knowing things. not knowing what to do, not understanding human rights issues. And we want this to be a welcoming learning space first. We'd also like people to fiercely debate, but we'd like that to be a choice. We'd like people to come in here and maybe get heard for the first time, even if they're wrong. I think it's important to really listen to each other. And I can read the second one. If you're speaking a while, we may interrupt.
Yeah, out of respect for everybody's time, we might want to keep the conversation going after a certain point.
Yeah, if for instance, if folks want to come on the show, you're welcome to join and come on the show. And so we might have you on, and we might also interrupt you if you've made a few points already, just so that we can make sure that a lot of people can make points on this show if they want to.
Yeah. Okay. And the last one is make sure everyone gets home safely. And I love this one because human rights doesn't happen at the expense of others. It happens because everyone gets their basic needs met. And when we're learning, I think a plurality of opinions is welcome. And I think we kind of try in any way. The idea is that we're helping each other get home safely, and that means everybody.
Yeah, when we have a vision of helping everyone get home safely, it allows us to really build community in the long term and envision a world where everybody today goes home at night and has a place to sleep, has a place that they can justly reside, and that nobody has to be homeless or in suffering anymore. And I added here, what might you add? And that's a provisional thing that we can explore. If anybody has anything that they feel like is important, you're welcome to share it in the chat or anything like that. But if there's nothing new, we can keep moving too.
I might just observe that the assumption of everyone gets home safely is almost an act of rebellion in and of itself, isn't it? Right? Because we look around and we see homelessness and what's on the news, but just unjust violence against whole groups of people. And I mean,
yeah,
it starts inside, and it starts in our own circles, and it moves out from there.
Yeah. Like it's something that is near us, that's all around us, and it's everywhere. And so we want to try to stand for everybody everywhere and support people. So, and I hear you bringing it deeper into the community and thinking about this is something that's not an abstract idea. It's a very real thing in the work we're doing.
Yeah, and so if I could add something to creating the conditions for everyone to get home safely, it might be something like everyone is responsible for managing their own powers of self-control.
Yeah, that everyone is responsible for managing their own powers of self-control.
Yeah, that would be
well, that's an interesting notion, right? Because it also thinks of the notion that we're sovereigns of ourselves.
Sovereignty starts within, yes.
Yeah, sovereignty starts at home. Within, at home.
Yeah, that's the idea. So I don't know if we can get to that later as we can add it, but it's just a proposal because
I like that. Yeah,
I was just thinking of Becky Bailey's conscious discipline and how before you can invoke your skills of turning conflict into cooperation, you have to sort of master your power of self-control. And yeah, there's a whole context there, but probably not for today. Yeah, I'm just trying to pull on that because I think what we're asking for or proposing or assuming here with everybody gets home safely is to rise above our own preconditions, our blind spots, the traumas that we inherit from our past experiences and hand downs and all that. Like, if we could figure this out, it might just scale up.
That's right. Like, it's not just something that is something that is abstract. It's something that literally applies to organizing for human rights and every human rights action that we take. Because every time we do a human rights action, one of the most common things I hear very often people in human rights work saying that I went to this powerful action, but they treated me like crap. And if we can solve that problem, then we actually have a chance at building a lasting movement that we can be proud of for our whole lives.
Yeah, like movements are about relationships.
Yeah.
And solidarity.
And so it's both, yeah. So
and narrative, right? Public narrative requires your story and our story to be the story of now.
Yeah, and so for people in the audience, as we go on, feel free to share how you like the notion of everyone getting home safely. Feel free to share about that, because we're thinking about making that a cornerstone of everything we do, and so we want to bring that before the community. Well, are we ready to embark on our journey today?
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
So, for everyone coming here, we've been studying this issue of human rights in Gaza for a while, and it might seem staggering, but we've done a number of different studies here. Maybe we can take a little tour of the landscape.
Nice.
Speaking of which, this is maybe a place we would want to start when we come back and survey the overall landscape, but maps.
Yeah, and right now I'm noticing that our heads are on top of the lower left.
You know what? Let me correct this. There we go.
There you go. Yeah, so it's sort of like a series of maps that contextualize the news that we see every day. If you were like me in October and you heard, "Oh, occupied West Bank," you might be lost, like I was. And so, just looking at maps, diving into the vicinity map and who the neighbors are for the Palestinian story, for the Israeli story, is I find really helpful. And then you can, kind of move from left to right and see how, like the green area changes over time depending on certain events, and the political context is even on these maps on the right. And so, I find that maps are helpful for orientation and putting ourselves in place. Like that picture right there in the middle, that's of the Jordan River floodplain, where the Jordan Valley, where which is sort of the reason the West Bank is the West Bank, is because it's on the west side of the Jordan River. It's very fertile. People have coexisted there for eons before the Mandate period after World War I, and I digress. But it's just, it's really helpful to think about the news and the stories within the context of their place. And maps. That's Oh, and you're muted.
So this is also something that we can keep, what we can explore in depth today. I certainly would like to. And then we've also got other stuff we can explore too. We actually have, okay, so it just starts off in this position. And we have a little bit about ceasefire right now too. So we have some of the latest news from Anthony Blinken's statement, the U.S. Secretary of State. And we also have Phyllis Bennis on Democracy Now! Talking about how far the ceasefire goes. Any thoughts about this before we look at the next section?
Maybe just who is a little introduction on Phyllis Bennis, because she's she's so many things.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that's right.
Just looking at her Wikipedia, it says an American Jewish writer, activist, and political commentator. She's focused mainly on issues related to the Middle East and the United Nations, and is a strong critic of Israel and the United States, and a leading advocate of Palestinian rights. Trying to find some of her books, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And then we've also got this section over here, which represents a lot of exploration that we've done over a while about the conflict on the whole, and for instance, we have an exploration of the different proposals for peace and how similar examples play out in history. And so in this section, we examine different aspects of the war machine. Any thoughts from you about this section?
I found it helpful when we first looked at it, because we were looking at like a typology of argument around the idea of a military solution to conflict versus a political solution. That was kind of an eye-opener for me, is just hearing from Zogby and then from Pipes back and forth. That contrast was really helpful. So hopefully we have a chance to listen to a few of those today.
Yeah.
As well as some of Phyllis Bennis's feedback on what Anthony Blinken was saying earlier this week.
Definitely. That I think
because they're related. They seem to be following this pattern.
Yes. And over here also we've got this is the case of Hind Rajab, who was killed by the Israeli Defense Force sitting in a car. We've got a bit about that. And then we have poetry from Gaza, if that calls on people. And that's what we've got.
Now, would you have a copy of this for people to explore themselves? Is there a way for folks to navigate themselves through the Prezi? I think it's called Prezi.
Yeah, I can share. Let me share a link to it for folks, so everybody can use the link. Let me get that link for everyone. Hold on.
It's like when you look at it, it's like a PowerPoint, but it's also like a mind map of ideas stitched together. And right now it's kind of a radial structure where the Gaza topic flows from the center out to the right, but like trans rights would flow from the center to the left. Economic rights and topics related to the economy is a new topic started that's going to sort of radiate to the north or above. And then we've got the Congo and some other fracking. Yes, I think it's sort of down and yeah, to the south. So that's like a way to get oriented, and we're figuring this out as we go. But the idea is to have a kind of neural network of human rights, a landscape of human rights, where the issues might be radiating out, but the goal would be to sort of stitch them together through commonality themes and yeah, just intersectionality. I know that's kind of a loaded word these days, but by studying one area, we might solve or sense patterns in other areas, and we might realize that, I don't know, all forms of repression against human rights are related. But that might be jumping ahead. That's just an assumption.
Yeah. Well, and it's there's a real opportunity to learn about a lot, and we're making a landscape. So if you find that you want to take a look at this, we put it in the chat, our Prezi link, so you can get that. And Tim, do we want to start with the maps today, or do we want to start with the ceasefire? What would you like?
Real quickly, we could do maps just for anybody who's. I mean, it's so compelling to see the dispossession of land over time. But if you zoom into the map on the left, it's kind of a good starting point. Yeah, that one. And that comes from Nora Ericot's book. I'm going to try to hold it up here. Justice for Some. She's a Palestinian scholar, legal scholar, who is telling the story events that we're going to see in the maps from a legal standpoint. And this was from her book early on. It says League of Nations Mandate System, 1922. So, right, these are areas under control. These are like colonies back in the day. And you can see Palestine was situated, including Jerusalem, between, I guess that's Jordan, Transjordan it says, and Lebanon and Syria and Egypt and Saudi Arabia. No.
Yeah, if you're in the audience too, let's also, if you're in the audience, what are you noticing in this map too? Feel free to share in the chat what you notice too. But go on, Tim, as well. I don't want to interrupt you too much, but yeah.
Well, I'm just noticing there's in the legend at the top left, there's 3 patterns or 3 color codes or whatever. One for British mandate, one for French, and one for independent. And Saudi Arabia is the only independent hatch pattern. But French is in there, and the British is kind of the main one, and the British is through Egypt, Palestine, Jordan, and Iraq. And I'm just going to call it out a little bit for Maple, who just said she's on the phone and can hear us okay, but can't see us. Sorry.
Oh yeah, good. Hi, welcome back, Maple. Thanks so much for coming again.
We just started looking at a few maps, and if you want, we could just scroll to the right and got another comment here from Rachel.
Hey, Rachel. Hi.
I see Rachel says the loss of land seems more systemic and happening for longer than most folks give credit to. Well, yes. Can we scroll to the right a little bit and look at that? Because we do have these maps here that do talk about this dispossession of Palestinian land, which is originally the green area that was showing up in Nora Ericot's map.
Yeah, and I want to make a shameless plug here very quickly. Just that as a group, we're reading Justice for Some, and I've got a link here in the chat. So if a week from today you want to read the introduction with us of Justice for Some, just click on that link and sign up, and you can join our reading group.
Yeah, here's a quote from Angela Davis, author of Freedom is a Constant Struggle. Ferguson, Palestine, and the Foundations of a Movement. She says, Nora Erekat forcefully argues that the skillful use of international law as a tool of struggle can be generative of hope and possibility for Palestine and the world. Justice for Some is precisely the book we need at this time. To go with your plug.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, thank you. And Maple says, nice just to hear my comrades' voices and great discourse. I'm on a cell phone with visual too, but it's tiny.
We'll take it. So glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you, Mary.
She's on a bus. Maybe she's on her way to a protest, a Palestinian protest.
Beautiful.
It wouldn't surprise me. It is Sunday.
So okay. So now, what do people notice about these maps in the audience? If you're in the audience, what do you notice about these maps? What do you notice, Tim?
I'm noticing that there's no date on the mandatory Palestine map, the first one on the left. And I'm going to propose that we put like a 1917 on it for like when the Balfour Declaration was.
That's cool. Yeah.
That seems to be a date that rings true for when there was sort of an uptick in migration of Zionist folks who identify as Zionists who chose to move back to the Holy Land or thereabouts.
Yeah, that's a important time. And then, what else do we notice here?
We lost a lot of green in 1947.
Right. Yeah. And that says, I noticed that says 1947 UN partition plan. And what else do you notice?
Well, just that's a year before the year we hear about so much when we hear about the word the Nakba and the Great Catastrophe, also known as the Great Catastrophe. That was a year later. So what does that mean? Like this plan was drawn up and then it was implemented in 48 and that was the actual.
Oh yeah, so in 48 to 1967 we see this, right?
Right.
And so
that was a rough year.
What do folks notice about that? Like,
I mean, right? Like 67 kind of left us with the Gaza Strip on the left and the West Bank on the right, but they were disconnected. But before they were at least touching. You see how 1947 they were connected barely?
Yeah, and then we get to 2020 here. And what's changed there?
The Oslo Accords happened.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, like I noticed that the patches are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Like they're now tiny little patches that are not interconnected in the green.
Yeah, talk about like reservations. Like it reminds me of how indigenous Native Americans get pushed into smaller and smaller lands called reservations, but except for these are called territories.
Right. Yeah. It's, so you're noticing that you're connecting that there may be connections between this and indigenous reservations in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and for folks coming, let me see. Oh, wait, let's see. Maple says, in response to you mentioning that perhaps they are at a March day. No, I checked for the usual Raleigh ceasefire March day, but none posted. They're holding a run race for Palestine at 6:30 past my bus time. We had a 4-hour die-in in Core Palestine Friday at UNC.
City of Raleigh,
Oh,
I think.
huh. Yeah. Thanks, Maple. And stop to go to have no right to others' land, period, today. Most violence over this colonialism.
Yeah.
So should we take a look at some more of the maps before we move on?
Yeah, I think these other maps are more of the who has control of the population, or is it self-determined? Is it being managed by others? And how is it being managed? I think there's like 3 categories.
Mm.
The blue, the beige, and the light blue.
And this is from the United Nations, I'm noticing. Does anyone else, what are folks noticing about this?
It's dated 2011, and so I guess it's not the most updated map on the that we were looking at on the right, but maybe the one before.
Yeah, and what are folks noticing around this? Is anyone noticing anything?
Well, it seems to be talking a lot about Area C, and something about structuring and the settlement areas.
Yeah, I noticed settlement areas here too, nature reserves, and closed military areas, and it's got what's zoning in Area C. So it's what do you? So I also see 70% construction prohibited, construction heavily restricted 29%, 1% planned for Palestinian developers.
It doesn't seem fair.
It when I notice it, right, like I noticed that there's a lot of land here that can't be developed on for the Palestinians in their territory.
Yeah.
Anyone else notice anything here? Anything else strike anyone on this? Should we come back maybe now to the work about the ceasefire?
Yep.
So we have some different options here. Here's some questions from Democracy Now! On the one hand, but then we also have the individual clips. Do we want to start with Blinken's statement and then just kind of explore from there?
That would make sense. I feel like the questions that were posed to her come from, the current policy from the Biden administration.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's some good context there.
Maple says, yeah, go ahead.
First she said, worldwide increased awareness and angst and resistance to evil actions of colonialism from this recent genocidal reaction to Palestinian self-defense. And then she said, we're prepared. You are so prepared. Thank you, Maple. That's kind of what we're trying to do, is ground this this experience that we're all having together in a kind of focused way to look at the evidence. And I'm sure we're not bringing all the evidence as balanced as it could be yet, but we're off, and we're at least aware that we're trying to keep this as independent as possible and let the evidence speak for itself. So just, y'all have to let us know how we're doing on that. But we're trying to just present the evidence and come to conclusions together.
Yeah.
And not jump to conclusions. Would you say that's
yeah, like as facilitators, we want to be independent, ideally. Now we're all learning here, so I'm not promising that we're perfect yet, but we hope to be very independent, but also be vigilant for human rights. And thank you, thanks. We try our best here. Thank you. And so, yeah, it's the idea. Now we want to be able to facilitate conversations so that we can actually really make sure that everyone gets home safely and that we don't have more refugees, but that we also support Palestinian sovereignty in ways, and indigenous sovereignty, and not forget about the importance of that and the importance of supporting indigenous peoples living on their own terms.
You want to hear the
let's
Blinken?
go for the Blinken.
Yeah. I'm not hearing anything. Can you?
Oh, you're not hearing? Let me fix this. Hold on. It might be the way I shared. Okay, let's try that again now. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Hold on.
just us chickens here.
No. Let's go back.
On Thursday, Blinken also spoke about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Children should not be dying of malnutrition in Gaza or anywhere else for that matter. 100% of the population of Gaza is experiencing severe levels of acute food insecurity. We must not allow that to continue.
Yeah, so what does everyone notice about what Secretary Blinken is saying here? What do folks notice? Should I repeat the clip maybe one time for folks, since such a short clip?
I mean, I noticed he was stating the obvious, but I've never heard him talk like that before.
Yeah, I heard him say that Gaza is experiencing a food insecurity, and what else did we hear specifically? I could play it again. It's so short. Let me just play it again. I will.
Yeah.
On Thursday, Blinken also spoke about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Children should not be dying of malnutrition in Gaza or anywhere else for that matter. 100% of the population of Gaza is experiencing severe levels of acute food insecurity. We must not allow that to continue.
Yeah, and so I heard him say 100% in Gaza are experiencing food insecurity. Maple says, if his lips are moving, he is lying like all abusers. He is a full Zionist. And what else? So is there anything else we noticed in this clip? And maybe we can, Maple, maybe we can like explore that puzzle of different times that he's been lying. And that might be something that we could explore together. Yeah.
And why? What incentive does he have to be headed in the direction of truth now? And I think that's one thing that we're going to hear about in the next clips is we're going to get some analysis on, why the Biden administration is changing its tune, which is really interesting. If you're like me and you want to learn how politics works.
Yeah, it's interesting to see like how this is working and what we can do. And I see Maple also says he may use the meager food drops that killed people as their action. And also career, revolving door, money.
There is that.
Mm-hmm. And actually, Phyllis, the person we're going to do, we let's see. Should we now? There's on the one hand, there's this clip of Netanyahu talking to the parliament. We could look at that. We also have Phyllis Bennis talking about what the U.S. has introduced to the UN Security Council, and then there's also her commentary on what Netanyahu said too. Does anything strike anyone as something you want us to start with? We could start with this clip up here, or we could also start with Netanyahu's speech. Does anyone have any strong preferences?
I remember she's talking about how the administration is saying one thing, but then she knows so much about the Security Council or the United Nations and how the U.S. policy is different, I think.
Let's wait a second for that. Let's wait a second for that so we can watch it first.
Is that one of these?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Let's watch that.
Joining us now from Washington, D.C. is Phyllis Bennis, fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies. She also serves as an international advisor to Jewish Voice for Peace. Her new article in The Hill is titled, "Gaza Shows Food Airdrops Often Take Lives Instead of Saving Them." She also recently wrote a piece for Al Jazeera headlined, "What Lies Behind the Biden Administration's Changing Ceasefire Language." Well, let's start there. Phyllis, if you can talk about what the U.S. has introduced into the UN Security Council. It could be voted on today. And it also what could be voted on is the resolution that has been adopted by or sponsored by 8 of the elected members of the Security Council.
Thanks, Amy. What we're looking at here is a lot of playing with words. What is different is the language of the Biden administration. We heard it yesterday from Secretary of State Blinken. We're hearing it from President Biden. We're hearing it from others using the word ceasefire, saying immediate ceasefire in some cases. We're seeing the New York Times is saying that the U.S. is introducing a resolution at the Security Council calling for an immediate ceasefire. That's not the case. What the U.S. resolution calls for, and we should be clear, there has not been a formal distribution of what the U.S. is actually going to put on the table for the vote this morning. There's at least 3 different versions circulating around, but they're all about the same on the critical description. It's in the first paragraph, the first operative paragraph of the resolution, uses the language of an immediate ceasefire, but it doesn't actually call for a ceasefire. What it does is recognize the importance of a ceasefire and then says, and therefore we should support the negotiations that are underway in Doha, in Qatar. These are the negotiations that have been underway for weeks. They are mainly focused on the release of hostages, as well as the parameters of a short-term ceasefire, probably 6 weeks. But the key thing is that the U.S. draft does not call for an actual Security Council call for a ceasefire. The language of the 8 of the 10 elected members of the Security Council is much simpler and much more direct. It says explicitly that the Security Council demands an immediate ceasefire respected by all parties, leading to a sustainable ceasefire. Period, full stop. The US language is very convoluted. It's various versions of the Security Council determines the imperative of an immediate and sustained ceasefire to protect civilians on all sides, and then says something about, and therefore we unequivocally support the negotiations that are underway.
Let's pause just for a second. There's more of this clip we can play, but I want to speak to what we've already heard so far. What's everyone noticing right now in what she said? What are folks noticing about what she's just said? Is there anything you noticed is there one thing that you noticed, Tim, about what she said, or any one thing?
The word unequivocal.
Unequivocal?
Unequivocal.
Yeah.
Jumps out at me because she was using that in reference to the other council members, Security Council members, how they were actually demanding a ceasefire, and it was a little bit more direct as opposed to the way that the United States' membership was coming from.
Yeah, I heard her say that they were playing with words, and she asserts that although there is expression that there should be a ceasefire, it doesn't actually call for one. It says negotiations in Doha should be supported. In addition to saying how urgently important it is for a ceasefire, it doesn't actually call for a ceasefire at the United Nations.
Why do you suppose that is? Like, how?
Yeah, that's a good
why can't
puzzle.
we use-
Let's put that puzzle. Should we put that puzzle up?
Yeah.
Let's. So I'm gonna just type it in the chat. Puzzle. Why does the U.S. not call for a ceasefire?
Or even a little bit more open-ended, like why can't they use language that is a demand or that calls for something? Why do they have to use ambiguous language, like supporting the negotiations? That's basically what they said. They would like to support the negotiations. What does that tell us?
Yeah. So can we say, why does the U.S. not call for a ceasefire and uses ambiguous language?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to put it in here in the chat. And so we've just, if you have puzzles, feel free to share your puzzles in the chat that you're noticing. This is one puzzle that we can keep exploring today as we go. If there's other puzzles, feel free to share them in the chat. And should we play a little bit more now? Play the rest of it?
Thanks.
Or is there anything? Feel free as you go, share in the chat what you're noticing. The more of these facts we can get down, if we focus on the facts here, then we can generalize together. And we can form consensuses.
So it takes all of the authority out of the Security Council, makes the council into essentially a group of cheerleaders for the existing negotiations that are underway, and takes away any additional pressure that an actual Security Council demand for an immediate ceasefire would have. Because Security Council resolutions, as you know, Amy, and I think most of our listeners know, is part of international law. It's enforceable. It doesn't mean that it would be enforced, but it's a very powerful signal, something that an acknowledgement of the importance of a ceasefire is simply not that. It's not that.
What did you all notice in that? What was there with what she said right now? What did you notice there?
She said something about the Security Council being reduced to effectively a cheerleader of the peace process as opposed to like a legally binding, um, yeah,
Yeah, I heard her.
enforceable.
So yeah, that she's becoming a cheerleader of a peace, or that the UN is becoming a cheerleader, the Security Council becoming a cheerleader of the peace process, more than I heard them say, than sending a signal in the process for a ceasefire.
Yeah, why is it that we have a Security Council cheerleading a conflict about security of human rights and parties on both sides of the conflict? Like, that something seems wrong about that. Like, you're the Security Council. Wouldn't that be like in your wheelhouse to set policy or take a more involved hand in the negotiations? But instead, it sounds like that job is reserved for the General Assembly or something.
Well, so I formed this puzzle. Why is it we have a Security Council cheerleading a security policy rather than setting policy? All right, I just put that in the chat too.
Cool.
So now we've got a couple puzzles here. Why is it we have a Security Council cheerleading about a security policy rather than setting policy? And then we have this other puzzle that you came up with, Tim. Why does the U.S. not call for ceasefire and uses ambiguous language? And yeah, if folks have other puzzles, feel free to share them in the chat. Do we want to, would we like to maybe now take a look at what Netanyahu had to say?
Yeah, sounds good.
This is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaking to the Israeli parliament Tuesday about plans to invade Rafah, again, where more than half of Gaza's entire population has sought refuge.
We, of course, share this desire to allow an orderly exit of the population from Rafah and the provision of humanitarian aid to civilian population. We have been doing this since the beginning of the war, but I made it clear to the President Joe Biden in our conversation that we are determined to complete the elimination of Hamas battalions in Rafah, and there is no other way to do it except by going in on the ground.
So what's everyone noticing here? What did you notice in what Netanyahu had to say?
I think I heard him say, of course, we are allowing an orderly exit of civilians from Rafah, but I don't know where they're supposed to go. That's confusing to me. It's right up against the southern border with Egypt, and I think it's like they're trapped.
I think I also heard him say they were providing humanitarian assistance in Rafah, which, like, I mean, I don't think it's that I usually like to bring out evidence and show stuff as much as possible, but I don't think the starvation in Gaza is a secret to anybody. So if he's saying that they're providing humanitarian assistance in Rafah, that's just blatantly false.
Yeah.
And then he says he's going to go ahead with the offensive, right? What else? Do we want to play this one more time since it's so short and see if we notice anything else?
This is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaking to the Israeli parliament Tuesday about plans to invade Rafah, again, where more than half of Gaza's entire population has sought refuge.
We, of course, share this desire to allow an orderly exit of the population from Rafah and the provision of humanitarian aid to civilian population. We have been doing this since the beginning of the war, but I made it clear to the President, Joe Biden, in our conversation that we are determined to complete the elimination of Hamas battalions in Rafah, and there is no other way to do it except by going in on the ground.
Okay, so what did you notice? What are folks noticing? Did anyone notice anything new here that we didn't notice before?
Yeah, I heard him say a little bit more accurately. Of course, we share this desire to allow an orderly exit, which is sort of like lip service. Like, we would like, ideally, that would happen, but then he says, but.
Yeah, and like I missed that detail too, because I thought and he says, and we'd like that, and he said something about that from the very beginning, but that still doesn't mean you're necessarily providing humanitarian assistance either.
From the very beginning, he said, but we have to flesh out Hamas.
Yeah, and so there, I think that's a good summary of it. I see Maple also comments, I've been guessing that the mega-rich U.S. bubble of big oil, gas, weapons makers, military-industrial complex are controlling all destructive narratives via less rich but lackey MSM sending out their message. MSM?
Mainstream media?
Oh, mainstream media.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, like we could certainly explore. One thing that Maple's talking about is that we certainly could explore she says yes to mainstream media. We certainly could also explore, like, for instance, recently CNN, there was an article in The Intercept recently. In fact, I can even just show this really quickly. There was an article in The Intercept very recently about how let me show you. This is from The Intercept lately. What do folks notice about this article? If I could get this away, okay. What do folks notice? What are folks noticing about this article? I hear Maple say Zionists are heavily loaded in these entities. What do you notice in this article? Like, I can see here, it says CNN runs Gaza coverage past Jerusalem team operating under the shadow of IDF censor.
It's a controlled narrative, I guess.
Yeah, it says the Jerusalem Bureau has long reviewed all CNN stories related to Israel and Palestine. Now it's helping shape the network's coverage of the war. So that's something we could explore more too. But let's come back now to what we've been exploring with the ceasefire. We've got one video left, which is in this area, which is Phyllis Bennis's response to Netanyahu. Should we, you want to play that now? You play that? Or,
sure.
Okay.
So there, speaking to the Israeli parliament. He also addressed Republicans in a closed-door session. And there's a question whether the House Speaker will be inviting him to address a joint session of Congress. Phyllis Bennis, if you can talk about what Netanyahu is doing, the significance of the calls for there to be new elections by none other than the majority leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, a real change from the way he has embraced the Israeli leadership?
You know, Amy, this is something that has a long history in the United States. Over the last 15 years or so, there's been a significant shift in how support for the long-standing U.S. support for Israeli military, its military support, its economic support, its political and diplomatic support, how all of that shakes out in Washington, it's become a much more partisan issue, something that that groups like AIPAC and other parts of the pro-Israel lobby have always wanted to avoid. They always wanted it to be a bipartisan consensus to support Israel. And it no longer is. The polls have been showing that for years now, that there's a massive shift underway. It's particularly generational, but it's also between parties, where on the Democratic Party side, support for Israel has diminished profoundly. And on the Republican side, it's been a complete embrace of all things Israel. What we're seeing now is a continuation of that, certainly with the Republican leadership in the House of Representatives, following what happened in 2015, when the Republican leadership in
this is Israeli.
The House at that time invited Netanyahu, who was the prime minister then as well, to address a joint session of Congress in order to pressure President Obama and oppose the Iran nuclear deal that was then being discussed. And it was one of these things that was diplomatically outrageous. It had never happened before. There was no consultation with the White House. Usually when a head of state comes, they're invited by the president. Not this time. Netanyahu ignored the White House, came at the invitation of the Republican leadership of the House, and gave what amounted to a campaign speech in the U.S. Capitol, as if it was his own Capitol, calling on the members of Congress to vote against their own president in the interest of his country. And in response, over 60 members, mainly of the progressive and especially the Black Caucus of the Congress, protesting the racism of Netanyahu towards President Obama, boycotted the speech, something that had never happened before. We're seeing essentially a repeat of that now.
Let's pause here for a sec and take a look at what folks are noticing. What are folks noticing here?
She seems impressed or taken aback or surprised by Netanyahu's addressing Congress without even coordinating with the White House, with the executive branch. It's like, I mean, maybe he doesn't have to, but it just seems like a kind of a sleight of hand or something. Yeah.
Maple Mary says, that lady might be drinking DNC Kool-Aid because both duopoly are voting for weapons to Israel. See actions/votes, not just talk. Yeah. So Maple's theory is that Phyllis may possibly be influenced by the Democratic Party. One thing that I noticed here was that she was saying that Netanyahu is more and more becoming a Republican associated person by the speech he made in Congress when Obama was president, and wants to do that again. And Joey says, I second Maple Mary comment.
Yeah, it's like actions versus words. They're still sending the money for the bombs and all the killing machine to continue.
Well, yeah, and I want to also point out that Phyllis, if folks hadn't heard it before, she said that what the Democrats and what the Biden administration amounts to is just mere speech, not necessarily actions. So I don't know if everybody heard that, but she said actually that the Biden administration ceasefire is not a ceasefire with teeth. So maybe, I don't know if people maybe missed that, but just in case there was any confusion about that.
You mean in her first segment? Where
Yeah.
she said,
Yeah.
They're using
so but we've got a theory, and two people in the room say that they think that she might be giving unfair treatment to the Democrats. Let's listen to more.
Where he is emerging as a partner of the Republican opposition that is demanding more support for Israel, more money for Israel, more arms for Israel, at a time when the Biden administration itself, despite its change of language, is continuing to send more weapons and more money, trying to get Congress to approve $14 billion more in military aid to Israel without any conditions, in violation of U.S. law. And what we're seeing is a real shift on the political parameters. You mentioned earlier the diplomats and former military leaders in the United States who are calling for a reevaluation of the U.S. aid to Israel, saying that it must be conditional. It must not continue at this level. And we're seeing that coming from all kinds of new places, from funders of the Biden campaign. The pressure is mounting in ways that I've certainly never seen in decades of doing work on this issue.
I wanted to quote from the...
Yeah, so what does everyone notice at this point? What do you all notice? What was she saying here? What was her point of view about the Biden administration?
Pretty much what Maple and Joey were saying. The Biden might be changing their language, but they're still supporting money to the war machine.
So she's saying also that both parties are sending weapons to Israel and the Biden administration. I heard her say that despite military people even calling on them to not send weapons, that still they are sending weapons without conditions, even violating U.S. law.
Is that what you call a false choice or something? Like we think we've got Republicans on one side and Democrats on the other, but in fact they're both supporting the same policy?
So you're asking if it might be so I guess this is a puzzle for us to explore, right? Are they both exactly the same? Is there a false choice here, or is there a difference between the two? Is one offering something different than the other one? And that is a puzzle that we could explore if we want to. Would we want to try to explore that? Now, should we put that puzzle down in the chat too? We've got 3 puzzles now that we've been looking at as a group.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the puzzles end up in the Prezi. Puzzles go in the Prezi. Mm-hmm. That sounds good. To be pondered, or some other P word later.
Can I say, how are the Democrats and Republicans different in actions, not just words?
Yes, that sounds great.
So this is a puzzle that Tim brought up. Does anyone else have any puzzles they want us to explore about this? Another puzzle that we've had today is, why is it that we have a Security Council cheerleading a security policy rather than setting policy? And then, why does the U.S. not call for ceasefire and uses ambiguous language? So yeah, do you want to explore any of these? We've got a couple choices here. We could explore those puzzles. We could also look at some of the other sections that we have about this learning. Like we have, for instance, we've already looked at the maps in Gaza, but we could look at, like, for instance, there's the Zogby pipe section that we were talking about taking a look at. What would you...
Are we done with her segment? Was there
That's
anything else?
like I guess we should ask ourselves if we are, right? Because we have more puzzles. So we only have we were saying I think we were going to end at 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern, or very close to there.
Did
yeah.
we get through the recording?
Oh, wait, Rachel actually asked, yeah, we got through the recording.
Okay.
And Rachel asks, actually, can we talk more about the ambiguous language? So that was the first puzzle that that we came up with. Why does the U.S. not call for ceasefire and uses ambiguous language? Should we play back the clip of Blinken and maybe the first clip of Phyllis Bennis a little bit, or do you think that would help reintroduce facts onto the scene a little bit?
Yeah, and I mean, it's a good question. How would we get into these puzzles? Maybe it's a good thing for next time is maybe we could bring back a little bit more evidence to each side and really kind of flesh out, are there differences between the two? Obviously, they have to speak to different bases that like to hear different narratives, about strong defense, or maybe about like not getting into other people's business. And we've got plenty of problems. We heard a lot of callers earlier this week on the Washington Journal on C-SPAN's say things like, why are we giving money at all to other conflicts around the world? Yeah. So that seems to be a Republican sort of argument.
Yeah, I think we could certainly explore the other puzzles next week more. I think, though, we could explore the ambiguous language maybe till the end. I hear Maple also offering a little bit of their thoughts on the matter and some corrections. It says only diff for climate solutions, Republicans 0, Democrats almost 0. Otherwise, Democrats not hiding warmongering. Ours not transparent, but also voting along with it all get the same money. And I think Rachel does want to hear some of the old clips because she mentions, I was on the bus and could not participate. So maybe we'll just play back the first two clips, the one of Blinken that's short, and then some of the second one, maybe just a little bit about what she had said.
Okay.
And Rachel also says, does ambiguous language serve an open purpose? So maybe we can also, I think that's another interesting puzzle, right? Does ambiguous language serve an open purpose? And so as we're going through these clips again, y'all are going to be exhausted with me at this point. But just share what you're noticing in the chat as we go. Feel free. By putting down, you might think like, well, wait, why are they messing with facts, right? Like, don't you want the opinions or the final results? But the point is that when we put down just the facts at first, then it gives people who are learning about the subject a chance to see the conclusions themselves. And so there's a real advantage to that. So like if you are an expert on the subject and you know more, it might be harder for somebody who's trying to learn about it to see it the way you do right away. But like if they knew all the facts and they saw the details, they might get that. And Rachel says, thank you, BA. And Maple says, cooking breakfast. Yum. What are you cooking for breakfast? Share that in the chat if you want. But then also feel free to share evidence because we love to know what folks are cooking. So yeah, let's go back to this clip now. And we'll start with the Blinken clip.
On Thursday, Blinken also spoke about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Children should not be dying of malnutrition in Gaza or anywhere else for that matter. 100% of the population of Gaza is experiencing severe levels of acute food insecurity. We must not allow that to continue.
So what are folks noticing about what Blinken's saying? And Rachel also says about the food. I was gonna ask, lol. But what are we noticing about what Blinken said again? Anyone? Feel free to share in the chat.
100% population malnutrition.
Yeah, food insecurity. Was it food insecurity? Yeah, right. Yeah, but right, like, and speaking to the depth, I heard him say something. I can't remember exactly what, but it was speaking to the seriousness of the problem.
Yeah.
Now, should we come back now to let me zoom back through here. Should we come back now to Phyllis Bennis's first clip a little bit and take a look at that? Oh, wait. Rachel says the way he said anywhere, for that matter. She says it made it feel very serious to me somehow.
Almost like a universal human right. Like we don't tolerate food insecurity. Is that what he was saying?
Mm-hmm. And Maple's sharing their perspective. He is an evil tool told to say some BS for election reasons. And Rachel says, yes. So I think the point of view of people watching right now is that the folks' perspective on this is that this is election speech. It's not actually diplomatic speech of action. And no, Rachel says yes was to you, Tim, to what you were saying.
How about the fact that people are out on the streets by the tens of thousands around the world? And that's got to feel like isolating for the Biden administration to be so tone deaf on genocide. Like they have to be feeling kind of isolated maybe, and maybe trying to dig themselves out of the hole politically that they might be in.
So I'm hearing from you that you imagine that they might be feeling isolated and tone deaf, and so there might be some attempt to try to come out of that space. Yeah. Let's take a look. Unless folks have more to say, let's just take a quick look at what Phyllis Bennis has to say on Democracy Now! Real quick, and we're just going to play the beginning of this. But I think the beginning is where she comments on Rachel's question about the ambiguity.
Joining us now from Washington, D.C. is Phyllis Bennis, fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies. She also serves as an international advisor to Jewish Voice for Peace. Her new article in The Hill is titled, "Gaza Shows Food Airdrops Often Take Lives Instead of Saving Them." She also recently wrote a piece for Al Jazeera headlined, "What Lies Behind the Biden Administration's Changing Ceasefire Language." Well, let's start there. Phyllis, if you can talk about what the U.S. has introduced into the UN Security Council, it could be voted on today, and it also what could be voted on is the resolution that has been adopted by or sponsored by 8 of the elected members of the Security Council.
Thanks, Amy. You know, what we're looking at here is a lot of playing with words. What is different is the language of the Biden administration. We heard it yesterday from Secretary of State Blinken. We're hearing it from President Biden. We're hearing it from others using the word ceasefire, saying immediate ceasefire in some cases. We're seeing the New York Times is saying that the U.S. is introducing a resolution at the Security Council calling for an immediate ceasefire. That's not the case. What the U.S. resolution calls for, and we should be clear, there has not been a formal distribution of what the U.S. is actually going to put on the table for the vote this morning. There's at least 3 different versions circulating around, but they're all about the same on the critical description. It's in the first paragraph, the first operative paragraph of the resolution, uses the language of an immediate ceasefire, but it doesn't actually call for a ceasefire. What it does is recognize the importance of a ceasefire and then says, and therefore we should support the negotiations that are underway in Doha, in Qatar. These are the negotiations that have been underway for weeks. They are mainly focused on the release of hostages, as well as the parameters of a short-term ceasefire, probably 6 weeks. But the key thing is that the U.S. draft does not call for an actual Security Council call for a ceasefire.
So let's what are folks noticing from what she's said so far? Like I shared here, the New York Times said an immediate ceasefire. This is what she said. These were her words. The New York Times said an immediate ceasefire. That is not the case. If they're not offering an immediate ceasefire, what are they doing? What do you notice in what she said that is that is making it so it looks like they're calling for a ceasefire, but actually is being ambiguous? And Rachel says it's frustrating that there are versions of a story.
Yeah, it's almost like the Biden administration is trying to support the negotiations in Doha without using their influence. Like they're trying to like tread carefully and like not come down on what's really going on.
Yeah.
Like Rachel said, how am I supposed to be an informed citizen? Good question.
Yeah, and she also says, which is a right, as far as I'm concerned.
I mean,
one thing I noticed in it is that they're calling. So they're saying that an immediate ceasefire would be an imperative. And then on the other hand, they're saying, but what all they're actually calling for politically or diplomatically in the United Nations is that we support the Doha negotiations, which is not the same as what a ceasefire would mean mechanically in the system if it played out. Maple says, it took us 10 years to get out of Vietnam.
Could one puzzle be, what is the purpose of the Security Council in the United Nations context? Like, what is their role or their mandate as opposed to the General Assembly, right? I think it has something to do with security.
So what is the purpose of the Security Council in the United Nations?
Yeah, can we look up, here's the structure, they're responsible for doing, this is their mission, everybody gets home safely, probably isn't on their mission, but,
Yeah.
gotta be something.
Yeah, I think that would be a really good puzzle for next time. We're coming close now. We're at 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern. Should we start wrapping up now? We've covered a lot today, and there's actually more. I feel like there's even more that we could explore today in terms of what we were exploring before. When talking about hearing from, let me pull back to where we were. When hearing from Maple about how we were in Vietnam for 10 years, right? If we come down here to the Zogby Pipe section, a big part of this is actually about the Vietnam War. And so we could explore that next time potentially, if folks would like, because I think that really connects, and I'm even tempted to stay a little bit longer to explore it, but now's also a good time we could wrap up too, and we've got good momentum. I don't know. How are you feeling about it, Tim?
I like the idea of looking at patterns of war, mainly because it does seem like since World War II, we've kind of commercialized or institutionalized our military operation, our industrial military complex, or MIC or whatever, military industrial complex. It's like we need conflict. We need entrenchable, high conflict where people are stuck, that there is no other like political solution that at least the narrative that they want to talk about, other than supporting the quote unquote democratic nation that we kind of align ourselves with somewhere in the world, whether it's South versus North Vietnam, or the Hezbollah war in Jordan that I think the Zogby pipes is sort of focused on, and from 2006. We could probably touch upon all of these military conflicts that just sort of play into our economy in a kind of favorable way. I think somebody said earlier, follow the money, or who wins when we've got all this devastation, war, human rights violations. We say we're a democracy, but yet we somehow figure out how to support all this war.
Well, and it's the I mean, we could even talk about how the military-industrial complex comes out of Keynesianism, and how you have these, it's evil Keynesianism, right? But like, it's Keynesianism nonetheless, right? Like, it's a jobs program, and so a lot of people get work through this. But we could also have jobs programs, doing social work and healthcare and teaching and other things. And I want to check in with some comments from the audience real quick. So let me maybe jump back to that. But Rachel says, "Thank you for indulging my tardiness. Always glad to take people wherever they come, whenever they come."
Thank you for coming when you can.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you. Maple says, "Y'all, good team." Thank you. Thank you. Real pleasure. We're a good team because we're all working here together on this learning this morning.
We're on the path together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And Maple says, "Caution, the money in politics piece is now way worse than in the 1960s, 1970s, but imperialism keeps running things."
Yeah, we'll put a pin in that for next time for sure.
Yeah, sorry, Dash. Thank you. I want to hear now and more about the Congo crisis. Ooh, yeah, we can talk about that more next time for sure. Again,
if you want to shoot me some articles, Dash, I can get them in the Prezi, or we can start a new thread. Or is there a public place that
oh yeah, we've got it. Yeah, we can talk about that.
The Discord. Yeah, the Discord.
Yeah, well, there's the Discord, and then we actually have the Prezi itself, which already has Congo stuff on it. So if you haven't seen the Prezi, just as we're wrapping up here, if you haven't seen the Prezi, let me share it for folks so you could or be part of it as we wrap up here. And so let me share the Prezi. Yeah, if you want to access the Prezi.
Can people comment on it like they can with like a Google Doc? Can there be any suggestions?
I don't know whether on the current settings to do the comment thing we might have to look at that more carefully. But here's what I'm going to put the link in here, and folks want to join our Discord server. I'm going to put a link to the Discord server in here too, if folks just want to join the Discord server. Let me.
Yeah, we could set up like an intermediate working session together, between now and next showtime.
Yeah, and
next week we've got. Is it this time that there's going to be a book review, and then we're going to do the Back to the Prezi in 2 weeks? Is that how it works, or are we going to come back here next week and do the book?
In a week from today, on Sunday, we'll be reading the introduction of Noura Erakat book Justice for Some, and I'm going to put a link in the chat for that too with our meetup. Do you want to tell everybody a little bit about Noura Erakat, Tim?
Yeah, well, she's a law scholar and a writer. She's really. I first heard about her on a podcast called Upstream. It's kind of ask us to rethink everything we know about economics, and they did a huge I think they're up to 7 episodes on Palestine, and Noura Erakat came on in episode part 2 and contextualized the violence we're seeing on the ground in the news by going back to the Balfour Declaration. And from a legal standpoint, it's really helpful because you realize that it's a question, like the reason Hamas is considered a terrorist group is because they don't have they've never been given sovereignty to formalize their own statehood. And so they don't have a country to defend, like in a legitimate war. So, she goes through these kinds of legal stories, if you will, like the fact that when people arrived in mass and started displacing, and they were like getting dispossessed of their land, they were also getting politically organized, and legally they were taking their case to the International Court, which at the time of the 1920s, 1921, they were going to The Hague, but I think it was the League of Justices set up, international courts, and they were arguing. And in every conflict, she says this, as far as I can tell so far, we just got into the introduction onto the book, but it's like they bring their best eloquent, rational legal case, and to no avail. There's no legal traction that they're getting in the court system, which is kind of like what we're experiencing now. If you watch the African legal team, the South African legal team, bring the evidence and the court agrees, but then nothing gets done. I feel like it's this deep pattern where the courts, or maybe even the executive branches, are all these kinds of puppet facades, charades, to give us the sense of due process. I think that's what the premise of her book is, that it's the legal arguments plus activism. It's like you take the argument to the street because it's not working in the court system. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, so what I'm hearing you say is that that a big subject of the book is this denial of Palestinian sovereignty that comes up over and over and over again, and that the legal system will even admit to something that is true under the law, but then there's this process, and the sovereignty has a lot to do with that, and that's what we're going to be exploring together here next week on Sunday morning, 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern. There's a link in the text in the chat for Facebook. So, and I see also that Maple has been tuning in, and there's also, for folks, just so you know, there's been some updates to our schedule a little bit. We're going to try to broadcast once, maybe twice every week, but we're trying to. Right now, we're in a period where we have a lot of material that we want to be able to share and edit into videos and get ahead on things. So we're getting ahead a little bit right now. So stay with us, but we'll be broadcasting. Definitely, we'll be broadcasting on Sundays and Mondays, and sometimes we'll broadcast on Sundays, and sometimes we'll be broadcasting on Mondays, and we'll update the schedule more clearly. So we really appreciate folks working with us and making this all work. And I have one last thing. I actually have two last things. So tomorrow we're going to be reading the first chapter, the introduction, first chapter of Amity and Prosperity by Eliza Griswold. It's a Pulitzer Prize winning book about fracking, hydraulic fracturing, written from the perspective of a family that has to endure it. So feel free to just message here if you're interested in that. We'll stay in touch with you about it. That's going to be tomorrow, and we don't have a link right now, but we're going to be getting one out just in a little bit. And then my very last thing is that also you can visit our website, codewhatever.us, and our website has all kinds of stuff. We need to update our events a little bit, but usually our events are posted on here, and our different projects and student testimonials. Also, you can donate to our GoFundMe, and there's also for our GoFundMe and our Twitch. Our Twitch has a donate button, so if you're on Twitch, you can see our donate button.
Donations equals hours to get these shows prepared and processed, and also advertised, so we can get more people showing up and scale this up, because it's great conversations and we need to be broadening our reach for folks.
Yeah. Many of us volunteer here. We have only one paid staffer. I'm the founder of the organization. I'm currently not a paid staffer, but we all work on this really, really hard. And
don't look at me. I'm not the paid staffer.
Yeah, Tim's not the paid staffer either. So please support us. It makes a huge difference. Even just $5 makes a big difference. So thank you so much, everyone. Anything else from you, Tim? I see also Maple says, yes, Tim, we all here know streets are both necessary and help us psychologically with our anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's showing up in solidarity with community.
Yeah,
we're going to be doing that. I think this Thursday there's a local kind of meetup solidarity around breaking fast at the end of the Ramadan day, and just we're going to maybe see what we can do from a declare emergency standpoint, how we can help, with maybe trainings, NVCR trainings, in case folks around here want to step into the streets with us and do it non-violently to great effect, which is needed right now because people are dying.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, and I see, and so as we just wrap up here, I see that Maple said I'm off probation, and smiley face about being in the streets, and
pretty much.
And so yeah, join us next time where we will continue exploring these many beautiful puzzles we found today, such as the way the political system works, what's the purpose of the Security Council and the UN, and other puzzles like
ambiguous language.
What's the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans? And so thank you so much, everyone, and hope to see you join us next time. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Take care.